Welcome back to another episode of UFC Casuals. I'm Bobby, along with my co-host Andrew, and we are back after a little bit of a layoff, a little bit of a couple weeks. There wasn't much to talk about, but we are back. Fight night last weekend, the fight night coming up this weekend, and some big news throughout the UFC world. So we'll jump right in. We won't waste any more time. We'll go ahead and cover UFC Vegas, Dawson versus Green, and we'll jump right into the main event. What an upset, and what a way to do it. Round one knockout for Bobby Green. 33 seconds at that. What did you make of this one?
Well, I feel like if Bobby Green was wanting to win this fight, that this is about how long the fight needed to go for him because if it felt like any longer, there was a clear disadvantage in the grappling department. We know this. Dawson has just ragdolled people before, and Bobby Green's been ragdolled before. And you just see what Islam Makhachev did to him, right? So that this was definitely the path to victory for Bobby Green, as crazy as it sounds. Just get in there, keep him at distance, and just land like a big straight like he did. I mean, it really wasn't even a big shot. It was just a straight down the pipe, and Dawson looked done right then.
Yeah, it didn't look like that big of a shot. I mean, at first I thought it was a jab until I saw the replay, and it was a straight left, I believe. Wasn't that strong of a shot, but I guess that speaks to Grant Dawson's chin, which is pretty concerning for his future in the lightweight division, who we thought was a great prospect. He still got great grappling, but that stand-up game and his chin, a big concern moving forward for him.
And then, like I said, just didn't get to show the grappling at all in this fight. It was the clear path to victory against Bobby Green. You got to go do it. And he decided to stand with him for 30 seconds, and that's what can happen when you have no striking. So
yeah, and I know it was early. It was only 33 seconds, so I get trying to feel him out on the feet for a little bit. But I was like, you could shoot for a takedown now. You don't have to wait this long. And man, I thought if Green would have got out of there with a knockout, it would have taken a little bit longer. But yeah, it was quick, 33 seconds.
Yeah, he's not the most powerful guy in the division by any means. He's not like a genetic freak or anything.
He's a normal knockouts. I mean, a lot of his wins are decisions.
Right, and he has great boxing. We've highlighted that before, but never the power. Really, he picks his shots well. His combos are clean. It's not that one punch power that he showed Saturday night. So, just how bad is Grant Dawson's chin? I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, it must be pretty bad. And I'm happy about this. How this fight turned out. I think this is much better for the lightweight division. Bobby Green's much bigger name, much more exciting character in the UFC too. And there's so many good fights you can make with him in those lightweight rankings. I mean, you already had Moicano call him out. You got Dan Hooker and Jalen Turner sitting right in that, high or in that 10 to 12 range. So there's a lot of good fights you can make with Bobby Green. And because of how good of a character he is, you can put him on the main card of a pay-per-view. You could have him headline another fight night. It works out well.
I mean, yeah, he just was on the main card with the Tony Ferguson fight, which I know you could say Tony Ferguson was the bigger name in that, but Bobby Green's the one that ended up stealing the show in that fight. He's the one that dominated the fight, got a finish, got the crowd excited. Bobby Green's a big name in the UFC, so he could definitely be on the main card of a pay-per-view against any of those names you just mentioned, because any of those fights sound like they would be a banger.
Yeah. Hell of an upset for Bobby Green. We didn't do our predictions last week because no show, obviously. But, neither one of us had this. Neither one of us saw this coming.
Safe to say neither one of us would have expected this outcome for sure.
Yeah. So I don't mind not doing the prediction. Main events this year have been wild, might I add.
Big upsets,
crazy upsets. So hard to predict. Moving on to the co-main event, Joe Pyfer versus Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Dominant performance from Joe Pyfer, ends the fight with a head and arm triangle, and a weird tap by Al Hassan with the closed glove. Strange situation there with the finish. What did you make of this fight?
I mean, yeah, Joe Pyfer just looked so. You mentioned it when the fight was happening. He looked massive compared to Al Hassan.
Big middleweight.
Huge middleweight, and it just showed. He looked stronger. He looked more confident on the feet. Every aspect of this fight, it looked like he was willing to just go out there and dominate Al Hassan. And he took those takedowns were net. He just looked like he was big brothering him, right? Like it didn't look hard for him at all. And it seems he ended up calling out a top 15 guy, didn't he? I can't remember who he called out.
He had some weird call out where he mentioned like Fauci and Zuckerberg or some stuff. I don't know. It was weird.
Anyways, I think those weird names aside, he is maybe ready for a low top 15 guy or just a fringe top 15 guy. I mean, he showed that he dominated this fight. So I think he's ready, man.
I think he's ready for that jump up in competition. And like you said, the confidence was such a big factor in this fight. I mean, Pyfer was walking him down, just beating up on him. And Al Hassan looked pretty hesitant at times. And I can't blame him. I mean, Pfeiffer is a huge middleweight. He was towering over him. And I know Al Hassan isn't a particularly big middleweight. He's pretty stocky, but Pfeiffer looked just so much bigger than him and
Yeah.
a lot stronger, as we saw in that fight. It was just ragdolling him. And the power discrepancy. It was just lopsided, man. It was a one-sided fight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say bad matchup because Al
Yeah.
Hassan does that to himself, right? He fights at that, and he's a stocky guy, like you mentioned. He wants to fight that weight class. He doesn't want to cut weight. But when you see that size disadvantage, against Joe Pyfer, and you got to look at that and think, all right, am I too small to be fighting these big middleweights like this? I mean, there's a lot of big middleweights. I
Yeah.
mean, look at Michel Pereira now. What is he, like, sick? We're going to talk about him later.
He
He's
was a
fighting.
welterweight too.
Exactly.
Granted, he missed
Like,
weight like 4 times, but
just big 6'4" guys cutting
yeah.
down the middleweight,
Mhm.
and how tall is Al Hassan? Like 5 whatever. So
Yeah.
he cannot be competing with these middleweights. I'm not saying cut down, but how are you going to watch this fight and not say cut down?
Yeah.
He's got to make a big decision.
Absolutely. Great performance by Joe Pyfer. Looking forward to who he gets matched up with next. Should be, like you said, a fringe top 15 guy at least.
Yeah, no doubt.
Then moving on to Alex Morono versus Joaquin Buckley. Pretty one-sided fight. Buckley, he was dominating this fight. Not dominating, but he was pretty clearly winning. Started to run away with it in round 3. Was picking up the pace and just putting it on Morono. Still not fully convinced about Buckley at welterweight. He it's not really the size. I know he's bigger now in the welterweight division versus where he was in middleweight. But that wasn't really a concern for me. It was how reckless he was, and that doesn't seem to have changed at welterweight. And I worry that he's going to get caught coming up in one of his fight against a higher ranked welterweight guy. What'd you make of this one?
Buckley's definitely not like a super technically sound fighter. And you saw that early in this fight where Morono is the more technically sound fighter of the two. He was landing when he wasn't so gassed because of the pressure from Buckley. You really just used his athleticism in this fight and kind of overpowered. I mean, that's all it was. It was just a genetic freak going at an average, technically sound guy and just overpowering him. But in that first round, it was a close round because the technique from Morono was showing. And Buckley is a little bit wild, and he lets technique just go out the window sometimes, and he could definitely get caught as a result against a better opponent, no doubt. We'll see.
Yeah, a lot of looping punches, a lot of running in with this, guard down. It was not the easiest performance to watch from Buckley. It was a little bit times where I was cringing watching it. He's fighting so recklessly, but he was able to get the job done, and he dominated round 3. So hats off to him. Still the good win for him. He did call out. He called for a main event fight on another fight night card. I don't see him getting that. I could see him being a co-main, maybe. I could see him bumping up that maybe fight. Kind of like Pyfer is probably going to a fringe top 15 guy at welterweight. Maybe if he's lucky, get a fight with one of the guys at the bottom of the rankings. But yeah, definitely not ready for a main event, I don't think.
Nowhere near a main event. I mean, we saw a main event this weekend that we didn't think would be deserving of a main event. Just imagine a Joaquin Buckley main event. That would be hard to watch. But give him like a low top 15 guy. How about like a Michael Chiesa who's just desperate for a win? Someone like that. Someone coming off a loss that's a winnable fight for Buckley. It's a winnable fight for both guys that, they both have their strengths. So just someone like that, low top 15 fringe. And hopefully he fights a little more technically sound in his next fight because like we said, against a better opponent, it could go bad for him.
Of course. And then the last fight we'll talk about from this fight night, Drew Dober puts Ricky Glenn out of there in round 1. Just a mismatch. I mean, we kind of knew this one going in this. Dober is just much better, much more powerful, and that was very apparent. Just the forward pressure on Ricky Glenn was too much. Ended up getting the round 1 knockout. Not a whole lot to say about this one.
Yeah, I mean, and Dober, just the powers there. He broke the record for most knockouts in lightweight history, right? So technically the most powerful lightweight ever, right? So I mean, stats wise. So I mean, and he knocked out the man who won the main event of this fight night, right? So the man he's a good fighter. He just loses those big fights that can take him to the next level, and he's probably going to get another like fringe top 15 guy. And he's got to take advantage of it and finally win one of these big fights for himself because he's just right on the brink of breaking, getting a chance to get into that top range, and he always loses the big fight. So this is going to be another opportunity for him.
Yeah, well, hopefully he capitalizes on it because he showed that he's capable of doing it. I mean, he's got crazy power.
Yeah.
Another fighter on this card who's not the most technically sound, but he can put most guys at lightweight their lights out if he lands a big shot.
No doubt about it. Huge
Yeah,
knockout power.
yeah. Moving on to this weekend's fight night card coming up, Yusuf versus Barboza. We'll start with the main event, of course. Sadiq Yusuf versus Edson Barboza. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. Not the strongest of main events, but I'm excited anytime Barboza's out there. And we saw in his last fight, just shut Billy Q's lights out, going in for a takedown. Yeah, anything can happen in an Edson Barboza fight, so I'm looking forward to it.
Spinning, big hand, just the kicks. I mean, the kicks,
Yeah.
the body kicks, the leg kicks, and you've seen countless wheel kicks up top, right? Knees now off of takedowns. What is Yusuf gonna? I mean, it's gonna be tough for him. Like, how do you go about fighting Edson Barboza? It's a scary idea to go in there and try and strike with him. So does he go to the grappling in this fight? It'll be interesting to see, man.
Yeah, and Barboza's a bigger guy. I mean, he used to fight at lightweight, so he's going to be bigger than most guys at featherweight. So I could see him being able to stuff the takedowns. My problem with this fight for Yusuf is it's not a 3-round fight. I think if it was a 3-round fight, I'd probably pick Yusuf by decision. But I don't think, Yusuf isn't known for getting those big knockouts. He isn't one of those guys that's going to go out there and hunt a finish. He hasn't had a knockout since 2019. Barboza, he will get those. That's how he fights, and I just don't see this fight going the distance. And if it doesn't go the distance, that gives me a hunch that Barboza is going to win, probably by knockout.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be late into round 3, maybe early round 4 that Barboza lands a kick and gets a TKO win on him. I don't think he'll put his lights out like he has sometimes before, but I think he'll get a TKO win.
yeah, and Barbosa's known to go quick though, so that's why in my mind he can come out and hunt early.
Yeah.
And maybe if Yusuf can just neutralize it a bit, just keep it at distance, maybe mix in the takedowns, man, maybe mix in some grappling. If he can't, I mean, I know you said Barbosa's a bigger guy, but if he can just get him down once and just stay on him for the rest of a round, that could be huge confidence going into later rounds for Yusuf.
Mm-hmm.
And but there is the factor of he's never fought in a 5-round fight. Barbosa's been there. It's going to be super tough for Yusuf. I don't know what to make of it. Did you make your prediction?
Yeah. I think Barboza is going to get a later, like in 3 or 4 round TKO.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I'm gonna pick the same winner, but I think Yusuf can control it at times in this fight and maybe lose like a 3-2 decision. And Barbosa is gonna have a clear advantage in the striking, and it'll win him some rounds for sure. But I could see it going the distance.
Okay, I don't mind that at all.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the co-main event: Jennifer Maia versus Viviane Araújo. Sorry about that. Maia, probably she has the advantage in the stand-up. Araújo a little bit more efficient in grappling. But I think what separates these two women is that Maia is a 2-fight win streak, and Araújo is coming off 2 straight losses. The trajectory with these two women, I think that's what makes the difference for me when predicting this fight. What do you make of this one?
A wise man once said, when you're trying to predict a women's MMA fight, flip a coin. Because like you just mentioned, whenever I hear about these women's MMA fights, they're like on a 1-fight win streak, 2-fight win streak. Oh, this one's lost 2 in a row. Whenever there's a woman with a big win streak, chances are they're probably the champ. And so when you're in this range where it's like, oh, they'll win one, they'll lose one, just flip a coin, man.
Honestly,
because like the skill sets are so similar. They're both kind of vets of the game at this point. They've been in the UFC for a while here. And I don't really have any, stylistically, I don't know what to make of this fight. There's an advantage for both women. You said Maia has the better striking, Araújo with the grappling. Flip a coin. I'm just going to pretend I flipped Jennifer Maia. There we go.
Jennifer Maia. I'm in the same boat with you. I think she wins by decision. It's tough to call this one. Like you said, it's so hard to predict women's MMA, and you look at their records too. You look at their records, who they've beaten and who they haven't. MMA math is out the window with women's MMA. I mean, it is the losses and the wins are so puzzling.
Random.
But yeah, I'm gonna go with Maia. I think she etches out a pretty close decision in this one. I don't have much else to say about it.
I'll go finish for the funds of it. 2nd round KO.
Okay.
Jennifer Maia.
There we go. Hopefully get some fireworks on it. we'll move on to the third to last fight on this card: Jonathan Martinez versus Adrian Yanez. Good boxing on both sides. This should be a fun fight. What do you make of this one?
And Yanez coming off that tough defeat to Font on the pay-per-view. He hasn't fought since then, so
Vicious
he's
knockout.
definitely gonna got knocked out bad. I mean, it was a big one of the bigger overhands you'll probably see in bantamweight, right? I mean, just smaller dudes like that had some crazy power behind it. So Yanez is definitely going to be looking to get back on track here. I think I picked him in that Rob Font fight just because he's a younger guy. He came off some big wins. His boxing is so good that you never really thought it would be Rob Font on the other end of it knocking him out. But Yanez needs to get back on track here, and his boxing's so smooth, man.
Yeah, I'm scared of picking Yanez after how that last fight went, getting slept like that. But I think he gets a close decision in this one. Martinez, he has grappling, so I could see him, stealing around. I think I could see him getting Yanez down to the ground and winning a round off that. But overall, I think Yanez has enough of an advantage in the boxing department to etch out a close win in this one off points.
And I'm going to go Yanez gets back on track in a big way, gets him a knockout in the second round.
Okay. I like that. Yeah. We'll move on to Andre Petroski versus Michel Pereira. Pereira finally moving up to middleweight. Long overdue. He's missed weight 4 times. This is something that was necessary, especially after how it threw a big wrench in UFC 291. I was really looking forward to that Wonder Boy versus Pereira fight. But, he's moving up in weight. He'll be taking on a 4-0 Petroski, but Petroski hasn't beaten anybody good. His last win was against Gerald Meerschaert with a very, very close decision where he barely eked it out. Took a lot of damage. I don't have a lot of confidence in him despite his 4-0 record. I think Pereira gets this one done. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, the only path, it's kind of like some Grant Dawson stuff from this past weekend where Petroski's needs to come out in the first 30 seconds here and just start shooting. Because if you let Pereira get into his groove where he's moving around fast and throwing his combos and just throwing crazy strikes at you, Petroski's going to get slept bad. So, he needs to come out here with a wrestling mindset, especially on short notice like this. It is a short notice fight for Petroski, so he needs to come out with that wrestling mindset, and maybe I'll give him a chance. But Pereira is so crazy and wild and powerful. I mean, he's a huge guy, so I definitely got to give him the advantage in this fight.
Yeah, no question. Petroski, he has a couple subs in the UFC, but Michel Pereira hasn't been subbed in the UFC, or for that matter, in MMA in close to a decade. I don't like the chances of Petroski taking him down and getting a sub off on Pereira. And I know Pereira's moving up from welterweight, so off that you'd think he'd be a smaller guy going to middleweight, but he is giant. I'm shocked he ever made welterweight. But even going up to middleweight, he is still massive for that division. And I think that'll work to his advantage, stuffing takedowns. And I think he'll keep this fight on the feet for most of it, where he has a very, very clear advantage in the striking. I don't know if I'm going to predict him to get a knockout over Petroski, but I do think he'll win a clear decision. I think he'll pick him apart on the feet, land some big kicks, and just cruise and win this fight pretty easily.
And I think Pereira knows in this situation where he missed weight multiple times, forced to move up a weight class, had his biggest opportunity taken away from him because of his own mistake. He knows he needs to come out here at a new weight class and put on a show and just get some confidence back from the fans and Dana White and all the promoters really, because he had his biggest chance and he let it go to waste. So he needs to go out here on a random fight night against a weaker opponent and dominate. And he needs to knock out Petroski, and I think he's going to do that because he is so much more skilled on the feet. And I don't know if he does it early or late, but I'll go third round, just give Petroski the benefit of the doubt. But Pereira needs a finish, and I think he gets one.
I like it. A lot of finishes in your prediction. Wasn't as confident in that, but I still like these predictions. I think we're on the same page with all of the winners. Another fight on this card, I know we're kind of skipping around here, but the main card opener, Christian Rodriguez, the man who beat Raul Rojas, is taking on undefeated prospect Cameron Simon. Great matchup for a main card opener on a fight night, especially a weaker fight night. I mean, Sadiq Yusuf and Barboza could be a fun fight, but it's a pretty weak main event. So for this to be the main card opener, that's pretty strong. So fight to look out for.
Yeah, and for a weaker like fight night card and main event wise, the
Yeah,
undercard is really good on this fight night. I mean,
very.
these are like undercard fights you'd see on pay per views sometimes. Just with
Yeah.
the level, like the hype of some of these fighters. Michelle
Well, Michelle
Pereira,
Pereira, he was just the third fight on a really good pay-per-view card.
right?
So, and I know
And
it was
he's
in a different division where he was ranked, but still.
and this is like kind of their punishment, putting him on a fight night. But it makes the like lower fights on this fight night
Oh yeah.
amazing. So, I mean, to knock down a Cameron Simon, Rodriguez fight lower, that's a good fight, man. And Simon has a lot of hype. He trains at the same camp as what's his name, Dricus,
Jerks.
right? So
Yep.
Duplessis. So that's looking like a good camp over there. South Africa's got them some good prospects. And Cameron Simon in all of his fights, he's fast. He's twitchy, and it's going to be a good fight. I'm super excited for this one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. We'll move on to some UFC news that came out this week in regards to some fight nights coming up. Petr Yan is out of the main event against Song Yadong in China on December 2nd. That fight hadn't been officially booked, but it seemed like it was well into the works. And Song Yadong, he posted a video of a text exchange with his manager about Petr Yan not being able to make the fight. Really unfortunate. And what's the deal with these bantamweight fights falling through? I mean, we've seen so many, just two of them alone with Song Yadong in the last couple of months. Saw Rob Font and Song Yadong. That fight got canceled. Corey Sandhagen, Umar Nurmagomedov, that fell through. And this is getting frustrating. And for such a stacked division, no fights are being made or are able to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like every big main event wise, every big fight we're getting in bantamweight. Even the Corey Sandhagen fight, he gets injured in the fight. He's out for who knows how long.
Yeah,
so
probably till like a couple months into next year.
So it just feels like every big fight being made, every fight that maybe even happens. I mean, there was an injury in that fight. Umar had to pull out, right? And then there's an injury in the fight. So it just everybody in this division's getting hurt in this range right here. Cejudo got hurt. Marab's been injured. Yeah. What's over these brittle bantamweights, man? And it's ruining these fight nights because we're probably not going to get as good of a fight here as Petr Yan and Song Yadong would have been. So it's frustrating. I hope they make a good fight out of this. I don't know who they're going to give Song Yadong because he's a fun prospect. He's ready for a big fight, and this would have been a great opportunity. It sucks.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been against Umar Nurmagomedov fighting up in the rankings in his next fight, just because of he had a fight against Corey Sandhagen gifted to him, and he pulled out of that one. But if the opportunity is there for them to make Song Yadong versus Umar, especially where Umar trains, I mean he's out there in that same area. It wouldn't be too hard on him to get out to a China card, and that would be a hell of a fight. That'd be really exciting. And I know Yadong would rather fight up in the rankings, fight a guy like Petr Yan, which would move him ahead of in his career. But getting a win over a guy like Nurmagomedov would shoot up his stock like crazy. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, a win against Umar would probably make just as much of a difference because you got Yan coming off some losses, right? Yan's coming off 3 losses here. Umar's undefeated, so it would be just as big of a win if he were to get that win over Umar as a Petr Yan fight would have been for him. So I think that's an amazing fight to make. Are both guys going to be able to stay healthy, though, would be the only question in my mind because they've both been injured.
Yeah. Well, Umar, he had that shoulder injury a couple months ago prior to the Corey Sandhagen fight, and we don't know what his status is. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot that came out about that injury, so we don't know, how he's looking around this time of year, if he's even able to come back. But just a thought.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be an amazing fight, man.
Yeah. Another announcement, Curtis Blades, he is out of his UFC Brazil fight against Jailton Almeida. Would have been a great fight. We were talking about this fight for so long and how this would have been a great matchup in the heavyweight division. Would have answered a lot of questions about Jailton Almeida because all we've seen him do is fight these big, Parker Porter build heavyweights who have no grappling. And we were like, finally, he's going to fight someone who has some grappling. He'll get to test that. And then Curtis Blades pulls out. And now we're stuck with Almeida versus Dilu. And then, I'll be rooting for Dilu, but I don't feel too confidently enough. I think this is going to play out similar to the Rosenstrike fight. I think it's just going to go just like that. The only chance that Lewis has, I think, is if he can miraculously find the chin of Jailton Almeida and put him out of there early.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been such a good fight for Curtis Blade. It would have been a great test, like you said, just to see. You fought, like you mentioned, you fought all these strikers at heavyweight with no grappling, probably never trained a day of jiu-jitsu in their lives. Fight Curtis Blades, who has the best wrestling in the division. It would have been an amazing test. And unfortunately, another injury in the UFC that, another event going to be ruined. Maybe not ruined because, you get Derek Lewis. Why not? He can always put on a fireworks show.
And with how crazy these main events this year has been on fight nights, who knows?
The upsets this year, you never know. But, it does kind of feel like it's got to be like a one big shot kind of knockout deal if it's going to happen. So, definitely not going to favor D-Lew in that fight, but you never know. I mean, it just sucks. Because if Almeida does win, we're still just going to have question marks about when he has to fight higher level fighters. So
and fight grapplers too. I mean, he can beat up on these, or he can take down and sub these big brawlers with ease. But I want to see him against a guy like Curtis Blades. That was a dream matchup in that heavyweight division. Just unfortunate to see it fall through.
Agreed.
Yeah. And then the last big news we have today, which will lead into our next segment. Conor McGregor has finally submitted his USADA paperwork. He will be in the testing pool. He will be on track to fight a UFC 300, which is in 6 months. That's how long he needs to be in the testing pool. This works out perfectly. Big news.
Finally, man. I mean, there was talks about, is he going to fight this December without even getting into the USADA pool? And I think UFC has been firm on this. They're just saying, listen, we don't want a Brock Lesnar situation with Mark Hunt, and we're gonna have a lawsuit pending because we let Conor McGregor fight roided up. So just get in the pool, get off the roid cycle, and now we have an opportunity for him to fight at UFC 300. It's going to be a huge event, just in time. It almost feels kind of what's the word I'm looking? Just like it was meant to be for it to be exactly 6. Right, written in the stars. Yeah. Just exactly 6 months away from UFC 300 is when he enters the pool. So it worked out.
No controversy, nothing like that. He'll be in there for 6 months, and it works out for him to be on UFC 300 perfectly.
Yeah.
So, like I said, our next segment, we will talk about a potential UFC 300 card. Before the show, we built our card. I gave Andrew the co-main event and the second fight on this card. I took the first fight, the opener, and the feature fight. This is with the assumption that Conor versus Michael Chandler would be the main event. So without further ado, I'll let you take it away for the co-main event of UFC 300.
So UFC 300, these 100 events, they're going to go big. And if we're not getting a title fight in the main event, which obviously is Conor McGregor, so it's a big fight, but you're going to want to stack some title fights here in the middle of this card, co-main and, the fight before that. You're just going to want to stack it with some title fights. So why go big or go home? I think the heavyweights will fight probably prior to UFC 300. So why not go 205? The timing is going to work perfectly. You got the fight in 2 weeks at 294 with Ankalaev and Walker. The winner of that's going to feel like they're the number one contender. And then obviously you have Yuri Prohaska and Alex Pereira fighting in November, right? So, I think they're going to want, 5 months off to, they're big guys. There'll probably be an injury in one of those fights. So I want the winner of that versus the winner of Ankalaev and Johnny Walker to battle it out at UFC 300 co-main. I mean, it'd be a great fight. Just there's 4 different scenarios there, and I think any of them would be a good fight, especially if Johnny Walker were to win. Can you imagine those matchups? I mean, Ankalaev is obviously really good in his grappling, and he can strike. So there's a lot of good fights to be made there. So whatever the combo may end up being, whether who's champion and who's the number one contender, it's going to be fireworks in that UFC 300 co-main on my card. Boom.
I like it. The third fight I have for this card for UFC 300 is the winner of Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira coming up in a couple weeks versus Justin Gaethje. I think he's next in line for the shot at that lightweight belt. I know he's had his shot before, but that win over Dustin Poirier was spectacular. He got a good win over Rafael Fiziev, who did lose his last fight, but it was by a fluke leg injury. So that win over Fiziev still holds as much stock as I think it did before. So yeah, a couple of great wins in a row for Gaethje. I think he's deserving of that shot at the belt next. And I think it'll probably be against Islam. A little early look into my prediction on next week's episode, but I think it'll be Islam. So we get to see Gaethje fight someone he hasn't fought yet. And it'll be for the lightweight belt. I think this would be great. I think the timing works out well. It'll be a little bit of a layoff for Gaethje. He'll have gone a little while without fighting, but depending on how the Islam Charles fight goes, if I don't think Islam will take too much damage in that fight. I think the fight will end early, no matter who wins. But a little bit of layoff for both men there. It should set up a great lightweight title fight there.
That'd be an amazing fight. I mean, like you said, with Islam, that'd be a first-time fight for him. It just makes sense. So, UFC 300, you want to go big or go home. I could see them doing another title fight here, whether, it's like a flyweight men's fight or a women's fight. They could do that. But a true just pound-for-pound fight that I've said I want to see, it's kind of a long layoff for both guys. It kind of is. Because I'm going to go Holloway versus Aljamain Sterling, because Max Holloway has absolutely nobody left to fight at featherweight. And Aljamain, prior to his loss to Sean O'Malley, said, I'm moving up to featherweight no matter what. And I think he needs to stay true to that word and move up. You're not getting an immediate fight with Volk because you lost your title, but why not fight, arguably this, probably is the second best featherweight of all time, Max Holloway, and, prove, hey, my loss to Sean was, not a fluke, but, I can go beat these high-level guys at featherweight. Maybe my loss to Sean was a fluke. Let me beat Holloway, and then I'm going to go challenge Volk at 145. That's just an amazing fight. I want Aljo to be true to his word and fight at featherweight. And, man, imagine that on UFC 300 on this stacked card. Holy cow, I need to see it.
That would be incredible. And to end this off, the first fight in this card, the fight I have opening it up, Andrew mentioned that he thinks the fight for the vacant heavyweight belt will take place earlier in the year. So I have a number one contenders fight for that division. Give me Cyril Gane versus Gelton Almeida, assuming Almeida beats Lewis. I don't think that's too bad of an assumption to make. I don't want to jinx anything, but the most likely outcome is Gelton Almeida winning that fight. So I have Cyril Gane taking on Gelton Almeida. That's not a good matchup for Cyril Gane. And I know he said he wants to wait it out. He wants to wait for that title shot because he thinks he deserves it. He lost against Jones. So he thinks going out there and beating the number 7 contender is enough to get you that title shot again. No, it's not. You're going to have to beat another contender. And I think the two guys who are willing to fight, Sergey Pavlovich and Tom Aspinall, I think they'll be the ones to fight for that vacant belt. So Gane's going to have to fight someone. I think Almeida will be deserving of that shot against him. And I think that's the fight to make. Really strong fight to open up this main card. This would be a great matchup. Favorable for Almeida, I think, because of how suspect Gane's takedown defense is. But still should be a fun fight.
And I mean, that would just be the main card of UFC 300. There's so many fights you can put on the. Paul Felder's wanting to come back. I mean, countless fights to be made on the prelims of that card. It would maybe be the best card ever made. And so, awesome. These are just 5 fights that we think could headline the pay-per-view portion of it. There's so many fights to be made, man. So many.
Yeah, and the UFC is going to stack this card up because this could be the last fight of the guy who's been, the face of the sport when it comes to popularity for so long, Conor McGregor. I mean, he's the guy who made the UFC explode in popularity. So they're going to stack this card up, given it might be his last fight.
I mean, if he lost to Chandler, he'd probably be done. And but if he wins, I mean, just imagine how hype it'd be. UFC 300, Conor McGregor, you're the biggest face in sport history, going out there and putting on a show and the biggest event ever. So it'd be huge. Yeah.
This is. I think no matter what they do, it probably won't look anything like the card we just built. But I guarantee that UFC 300 is going to be a hell of a card. And with the recent news, it seems like Conor is going to be headlining that because I don't think he's going to be below anybody on a UFC pay-per-view.
Definitely not.
All right. Well, that wraps up episode 10 of UFC Casuals. If you watched this far, thank you so much for tuning in. a like and maybe a subscription would be greatly appreciated. And until next week, we'll see you guys.
See you guys.